They said I was the family shame. At birthdays, they toasted my brother's degrees. At Christmas, my chair was always missing. Then, at my father's retirement gala, in front of 200 guests, he raised his bourbon and toasted his legacy, and I wasn't in it. Just when I thought it couldn't cut deeper, the news behind him broke. Breaking alert, my name, my rank, Major General Harper Quinn. I was the youngest general in US military history, but no one clapped, no one turned. They saw me, and still chose to forget me. That was the moment I knew I was never their daughter, just a burden with medals. It was supposed to be a celebration. My father's retirement party was the kind of affair you'd expect from a small-town patriarch who'd spent 4 decades commanding respect, if not affection. White tents stretched across the Quinn estate's back lawn, draped in navy and gold bunting, while a string quartet played patriotic classics just off the veranda. I arrived late, on purpose. I had learned over the years that my presence rarely enhanced family functions. Mostly, it just reminded them I existed. I wore my uniform, pressed, immaculate, the silver star on my shoulder, catching the last of the Missouri sun. No one greeted me, not even my mother. They saw me, sure. Eyes flickered my way, some widened in brief surprise. Others narrowed, like I'd tracked mud across silk rugs. But no one said my name. No one smiled. Marcus, my older brother, was at the centre of the lawn, swarmed by former classmates and local officials. His navy dress whites were tailored within an inch of perfection. He laughed loudly, tossing around phrases like National Security Directive and Senate Liaison. He had the Quinn charisma, the Quinn face, the Quinn future. I was the anomaly, darker-haired, sharper-edged, emotionally inconvenient. My mother stood by the dessert table, her pearls tight against her neck like they were holding something in. I approached quietly, like I always did. "Hi, Mom," I said. She turned, startled. "Oh, Harper, you're here." Her smile was brittle. "Be sure to grab some lemon bars before they're gone." Then she turned back to arranging forks. And then, like a signal from the gods of generational arrogance, my father rose from his seat near the fire pit, a glass of bourbon in hand. The crowd quieted. Even the quartet stopped mid-measure. He raised his glass, the ice clinking against crystal. "To Marcus Quinn," he declared, his voice booming and authoritative, "a son who has brought honour to this family's name, a man of discipline, vision and pride." Applause thundered, laughter, whistles. I clapped once, maybe twice. Then he turned, his gaze sweeping across the crowd, landing on me like a dull knife. "And to my daughter," he added, voice dropping half a tone. "Well, her choices are her own burden to carry." Silence. It was a vacuum. People froze mid-sip, mid-laugh. A woman near the buffet dropped her mini quiche. Somewhere, a child asked too loudly, "What does that mean?" No one answered. My face remained frozen, not stoic, not brave, just still. I had trained for this. Emotional warfare at home was often more brutal than any combat zone. But nothing prepares you for your father dismissing you not just as a daughter, but as a human being in front of the world. And then it happened. The outdoor bar's flat-screen TV, which had been playing a baseball game on mute, suddenly flickered. Red banners, a familiar network logo. Then the words, "Breaking news." Every head turned. My father's voice stuttered into silence. The anchor spoke. "We've just received confirmation from the Pentagon. 35-year-old Major General Harper Quinn has been named the lead architect of the global AI counteroffensive strategy, credited with turning the tide in Operation Silver Veil." And there it was. My face, my rank, my operation. Blown up on a 50-inch screen behind the man who just called me a burden. The silence deepened. This wasn't awe, it wasn't pride, it was confusion, discomfort, even fear. As if seeing me, in that uniform, in that role, disrupted the narrative they had cultivated for years, that I was the one who had strayed, failed, fallen short. My father's bourbon glass trembled in his hand. The bourbon itself swayed gently. Like it, too, didn't know where to go. He didn't look at me. No one did. I didn't smile, didn't nod. I just stood there, fully visible for the first time in years, and yet still unseen. I should have left then, just walked away while the screen still had my face on it, while the weight of the silence was still pressing down on the party like humidity before a thunderstorm. But I didn't. I stayed. Not because I hoped someone would say something, no, that hope had long since withered, but because I needed to feel every second of it, needed to burn this moment into my memory like a brand. The screen behind the bar continued its loop. Footage of my field briefing, audio from press conferences, photos from Kabul, Seoul, DC. My name in the headline, ticker, looping every 10 seconds. But no one asked me a single question, no congratulations, no shock, no shame, just that same practiced Midwestern indifference. I moved through the yard like a ghost, unacknowledged, avoided, erased. Even Marcus didn't look smug anymore. He looked tight, like he was calculating how to spin this, how to re-center the spotlight. He raised his glass again, laughing too loudly at some forced anecdote, redirecting the crowd's attention like a practiced showman. And they followed. Of course they did. I turned toward the house, away from the laughter that now sounded like static in my ears. My boots echoed against the flagstone path up the porch. Inside, the air was cooler, dimmer, quieter. The kind of quiet that presses against your ribcage. I paused at the wall of family photos in the hallway. It hadn't changed in years. Marcus at the Naval Academy, Marcus shaking hands with a senator, Marcus next to Dad at the ribbon cutting for the Veterans Clinic. There used to be one photo of me here, airborne school graduation, sweat and dust on my face, a rare smile cracking my lips. I remembered when they'd hung it. I remembered when it quietly disappeared. It wasn't here. I stood in front of the empty patch of wall where I knew it had been. I didn't move for nearly a minute. Then I walked into the kitchen. My mother was there, cutting strawberry pie with surgical precision. "You didn't have to storm off," she said, not looking at me. "I didn't," I replied. "I walked." She sighed, the kind that sounded rehearsed. "Your father, he didn't mean it that way." I blinked. He didn't even say my name. She set down the knife, finally meeting my eyes. "It's not about you, Harper, it's complicated." "No," I said, my voice even. "It's very simple." Her hands wrung the dish towel like it was holding secrets. "You've always been intense, hard to read. You make people nervous." "Because I make them see what they refuse to look at," I said. She didn't answer, just returned to the pie like that conversation hadn't happened. I turned, walked back down the hallway, past the missing photo, up the stairs. My childhood bedroom was sterile now. Beige paint, hotel art, a sign above the dresser that read, "Home is where your story begins." I laughed bitterly. I opened the closet, empty hangers. I checked under the bed. Nothing. No trace of me. Which meant one thing. The attic. It took effort to pull the ladder down without it creaking. I climbed into the space, flashlight in hand. The attic smelled like old insulation and forgotten things. I wove between boxes marked Christmas, Marcus, college, Mum's china, and there in the back corner I found it. A beat-up box, water-stained, marker faded. One word scrawled on the side in my father's distinct, all-capital handwriting. Harper. Not Harper's keepsakes. Not Harper's things. Just Harper. Like a file cabinet. Like a classified case. I opened the box. Inside was everything. My first marathon medal, the one I'd sent a photo of with pride. A laminated letter from my commanding officer praising my leadership in a convoy ambush. A green beret Pop gave me the day I made Special Forces selection. He died 2 weeks later. They were all tossed together like junk, tangled, bent, dust-covered, no frames, no care. At the bottom, half-bent and water-damaged, was my Soldier of the Year certificate from the 82nd Airborne. I remembered calling home that day, trembling with pride. I'd barely gotten the words out before Dad cut me off to brag about Marcus getting into Georgetown. I picked up the green beret gently. It still smelled faintly of Pop's cologne, something earthy and old. I sat cross-legged in the attic's heat, holding it in my lap. And that was when I knew. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had thrown me away. The attic held its breath with me. I sat there among dust and memories, surrounded by the leftovers of a life that had never been celebrated. The insulation crinkled faintly in the rafters, or maybe that was just the sound of the box settling deeper into its corner. I didn't move, I didn't cry. There was something beyond sadness at this point, something quieter, heavier, not grief, not anger, just clarity. I pulled out each item, one by one, a dried corsage from my first school dance. I went with a friend from track because I didn't get asked. I remembered Mum fussing over my hair, but she never took a photo. Marcus had a science fair that day. A dog tag Pop had engraved for me when I got into ROTC. It was a little crooked, the letters off-centre, but he'd given it to me with teary eyes and a bear hug. "You'll do more than all of us combined," he'd said. A cracked picture frame. Me in uniform, standing at graduation, saluting with a grin. The glass was broken, the backing warped. I turned it over. No note, no date, nothing to mark its value. Then I found the smallest thing in the box. A note I'd written in middle school, still folded into a tiny square. It simply said, "Maybe if I do everything right, they'll see me." I closed my eyes. That version of me, 12, hopeful, invisible, still lived inside somewhere, curled up and waiting. I packed everything back in the box, this time with care. I folded the old hoodie around the certificate, tucked the medal between soft pages of an unused notebook. I smoothed the beret with my palms. When I was done, I sat back, letting the weight of what I'd just rediscovered sink in. Not the items, the pattern. They hadn't merely overlooked me, they had actively curated their memory of this family to exclude me. Back downstairs, I placed the box on the bed. The silence of the house was deep now. Everyone still outside, probably toasting Marcus again or pretending the earlier news broadcast had never happened. I stared out the window, the field beyond lined with hay bales, the kind I used to race around barefoot as a kid. Marcus had hated the bugs. I'd loved the speed. I could almost hear my younger self laughing. But that girl had been lonely too. No one saw how many laps she ran alone. The door creaked open behind me. "Harper?" My mother's voice, soft. I didn't turn. She stepped in, saw the box, the open lid, the careful arrangement I had made from their discard pile. "I didn't know that stuff was still here," she said, walking to the edge of the bed. "Because you didn't look," I replied. She lowered herself onto the mattress, careful not to touch anything. "I didn't mean to make you feel unloved," I offered. She hesitated. "Invisible." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "That's generous. Invisible would have meant neutral. You went out of your way to erase me." Her eyes widened, as if I'd said something indecent, but I didn't back down. I held her gaze. "I'm sorry," she said at last. "For the photo, for the pie, for all of it." I nodded. "But you're not sorry for how it started, for how you always let him choose Marcus over me." She didn't deny it. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something wrapped in tissue. She placed it gently on the comforter. I unfolded it. My childhood pendant, a small silver anchor engraved with strength in silence. I'd lost it during basic. "I found it in the laundry room years ago," she whispered. I meant to give it back. I just didn't. I stared at it, not because of what it was, but because it proved something. Even when she found a piece of me worth keeping, she hid it away. "Why now?" I asked. She looked at the window, not me. "Because you were on TV tonight, and because I think I was afraid of how far you'd gone without us, that maybe we never mattered." I blinked. "You didn't lose me, Mom. You just never tried to keep me." She nodded slowly. "I know." She stood, left the room, and this time didn't close the door behind her. The anchor pendant lay in my hand like a ghost. It was cold, its chain slightly tangled, and yet I couldn't stop staring at it. I tried to remember how I'd felt wearing it as a kid. Hopeful, maybe? As if it could tether me to something solid, something safe. But it had fallen off during a 10-mile ruck in basic, and like so many other things, no one had noticed it was missing. Now here it was again, returned not with warmth or intention, but because I'd forced my way into visibility, because a news anchor had spoken my name into the same air my family breathed, and they'd been left with no choice but to look. I placed the pendant on the nightstand and sat beside the box once more. In the silence, the house creaked softly, expanding and settling like an old wound. Downstairs, I heard the faint clink of glasses and the slow dying hum of conversation. The party was winding down. I pictured the guests awkwardly avoiding eye contact with my parents, pretending not to know what they'd seen on TV. The Quinns were masters of rewriting history in real time. I could already hear Dad explaining it away. "Oh yes, Harper, of course. She's always been exceptional in her own way. We're very proud." He'd smooth it out like he always did, until the version that fit best slid perfectly into the family narrative. But this time, I wouldn't let him. I stood, took the box in both arms, and carried it downstairs. My boots thudded on the steps with deliberate weight, like the sound of a verdict. I passed the kitchen, empty now, pie half eaten on the counter, and walked into the formal living room where Dad stood near the fireplace, swirling the last of his bourbon. He looked up as I entered. His face didn't change, not a twitch. "Can I help you?" he asked, the tone clipped. I set the box on the coffee table and opened it without a word. He glanced inside. One look. That was all. "You kept this," I said. "You chose not to throw it out, but you also chose to bury it." He said nothing. I picked up the green beret and held it out. "Pop gave me this, the day I made selection, you remember?" A pause. Then, "He was sentimental." "No," I corrected. "He was proud. He told me I'd do more than all of you combined." Dad's mouth tightened. "Your grandfather romanticized war." "No, he romanticized courage," I said, "which none of you ever gave me." "You're being dramatic," he said. I laughed. A small, flat sound. "Says the man who erased his daughter from the family gallery because she made it without his help." His face darkened. "I didn't erase you. We simply updated the decor." "Right," I said, "because truth is ugly, isn't it?" He walked to the bar cart, refilled his glass. "You've always been difficult, Harper. Intense, unyielding. You were never meant for soft spaces. And you were never meant to lead anyone," I snapped. "Because leadership doesn't mean control, it means responsibility." He sipped. "I led this family." "No," I said, stepping forward. "You curated it, like a display, Marcus the heir, Ethan the extension. And me? The flaw, the burden, the one who didn't play her part." He looked at me now, really looked. And for the first time, I saw something behind his eyes. Not regret, not shame, fear. Because I wasn't asking for inclusion anymore, I was challenging the entire foundation. I leaned over the box, pulled out the Soldier of the Year certificate, now laminated and bent. I held it up. "I got this in 2016, I said. I called you. Remember what you said?" He didn't answer. "You said, 'Good. Marcus just got into Georgetown. You said long-distance calls still cost something, then you hung up. The bourbon in his glass stilled. I want you to remember that moment, I said, because that's when I stopped calling. And then I left the box there, open, not out of spite, but as a monument, not to what I had lost, but to what I had survived. The next morning, the house was quiet, not peaceful, just silent in that heavy way that comes after a storm no one talks about. I packed early, folded my uniform with crisp corners, and slipped the green beret into my duffel last. The box stayed downstairs, still open, still daring. I didn't say goodbye. The drive back to DC was long, broken by stretches of fields and static-filled radio. I welcomed the noise. It gave my mind somewhere to hide, somewhere to keep from looping the same images. Dad's face refusing to change, Mom's hands tightening on the pie knife, Marcus's smirk dissolving into calculation. That wasn't family, that was PR. When I finally reached my apartment, I dropped the duffel by the door and went straight to the fridge. A half-empty bottle of water, a forgotten yogurt. I stared at them like artifacts. Then I sat on the floor and leaned back against the cabinet. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and opened the old spreadsheets I'd used to track my deployments. Coordinates, expenses, movement logs. And then one more sheet, titled Support Transfers. I stared at the rows, years of deposits. Every month, like clockwork, a piece of my paycheck routed to a shared Quinn family account. No one asked for it, but no one ever stopped it either. I told myself it was for the house, for Mum, for the cracked second-story window that leaked during storms, for the porch that creaked and tilted. I imagined the money being used to fix something broken. Turns out it was, just not in the way I thought. The phone call came on a Sunday. I'd just made coffee, the bitter kind from a tin I brought back from Kandahar. The laundry was in mid-fold on my bed. Mum's voice chirped brightly on speaker. "Thank you for the money, sweetheart. It really helped." I smiled. "Good. Did you get the new windows?" A pause, then, "Oh, no, we didn't quite get to that." "Oh?" "Well, Marcus needed to look sharp for the New York mixer. Armani had this suit. It fit him like a glove. The rooftop event at the Empire Hotel was very exclusive." I froze. "You used the money I sent for Marcus's suit?" "And hotel, and flights. But honey, he's making real moves now. These connections don't happen twice." I didn't say anything. The coffee turned cold in my hand. My brain stalled. "And you should have seen the pictures," she added. "I'll send them. He looked just like your father at that age." I hung up. I didn't mean to. I think I just stopped listening. The call ended, and for a long time I stared at the folded T-shirt in my lap. Then I opened a drawer and pulled out the ramen pack I'd planned to eat that night, because I was saving to buy a decent pair of winter boots. The irony made me laugh. It sounded hollow in the apartment. That night I opened the banking app. I cancelled the auto transfer. No warning. No explanation. Just silence. 3 days later, the phone rang again, my father this time. "You think you're too good for us now?" he barked before I could speak. "You don't just cut off your family like that." I held the phone away from my ear. His voice, commanding and sharp, drilled through the line like a reprimand. "You selfish little—" I cut in quiet and firm. "I'm just learning from the best, sir." And I hung up. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no tears, no yelling, just a boundary, clean, final. That was the day I started spending on myself, not extravagantly, but consciously. A real winter coat, a mattress that didn't make my back scream. I even bought a used bike to ride along the Potomac. One weekend, I rented a cabin with a few squad mates. We grilled burgers in the cold and passed around cheap beer in dented mugs. It was the first time in years I laughed without restraint. No rank, no politics, just people who understood weight without needing it explained. I never told my family, and they never asked. I'd stopped being a provider, which meant to them I'd stopped being useful, but to me, I'd just started being human. Time passed, quietly, without confrontation. That's how my family preferred it. Conflict buried beneath politeness, disappointment folded into silence like linens in the hall closet. They didn't ask why the money stopped. No one called to check on me. The absence was telling. I hadn't just cut off the cash. I'd removed myself from the function I'd been assigned, the quiet benefactor, the invisible backbone. At first, the guilt came in waves. I'd lie awake at night, wondering if they were struggling, if the house was falling apart, if Mum was rationing groceries. But then I'd remember the Armani suit, the rooftop cocktails, the photos on social media, Marcus posing with congressmen, laughing with diplomats, tagged in places I couldn't afford to visit. The guilt faded fast after that. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my collar before a classified briefing. I didn't recognize the woman staring back, not because I'd changed drastically, but because I looked solid, steady, like someone who had finally stopped shrinking to fit into someone else's frame. That day, the meeting room was packed, mostly men, mostly older, brass-polished, sharp-eyed, and eager to discount the only woman at the table. I was used to it. I presented a full tactical debrief, insurgent route mapping, risk assessments, AI pattern interference on drone targeting. My voice didn't waver, my hands didn't tremble. Most of them nodded absently, except one. Colonel Eva Rostova sat at the back, half-shadowed, black coffee in hand. She didn't interrupt, didn't smile. But her eyes stayed on me the entire time, sharp as razors. After the meeting, she approached. "You've got a strategic mind," she said. "Most people spend 3 decades trying to fake what you do naturally." I blinked, unsure if I should thank her or deflect. "Don't let them reduce you to a parachute and a salute," she added. "You're more dangerous than that." And then she walked off. It was the first time in years I felt seen, not by a rank, not by bloodline, but by someone who recognized the work, the real kind. The kind no photo on the Quinn fireplace would ever reflect. Later that year, we deployed again. Afghanistan, the Kunar province. It was early spring. The cold was bone-deep and metallic, like the air itself carried memory. The locals called the region the Valley of Silence. Apt, I thought. Everything I'd survived echoed louder here. One night, our unit was ambushed during a routine recon. Bullets rained from the ridgeline, sharp and fast. Chaos bloomed. I was commanding the flank. Orders came through the radio: fall back, leave non-essentials, regroup. But behind a half-collapsed wall I saw movement. Sergeant Cole Maitrey. His leg was mangled, twisted under debris. Blood soaked the dust beneath him. "Leave him," someone said. "We don't have cover." But I saw his eyes, wide, not with fear, but trust. "Cover me," I barked, already moving. 2 soldiers followed without hesitation. We crawled low, bullets cracking past. I reached Cole, braced my shoulder under his arm, and dragged. Inch by inch, his breath came in gasps. My shoulder screamed. But we made it. Later, in the field tent, Cole was hooked to morphine and wrapped in gauze. He was barely conscious, but when he saw me, he smiled, lopsided, raw. "You didn't leave me," he whispered. "Never," I said. He pulled something from his pocket, a crushed chocolate bar. He broke it in half and handed me the bigger piece. "To the general who doesn't leave anyone behind," he said. It tasted like chalk and grit and the sweetest thing I'd ever eaten. That night, I sat outside the tent under a black sky full of unfamiliar stars, and I realized something. Family wasn't who raised you. Family was who showed up when it cost them something. It was a Monday, routine, unassuming, the kind of day that started with black coffee and a back-to-back calendar of briefings, reports, and inboxes stacked like dominoes waiting to collapse. I was in my Pentagon office, damp boots drying under the desk, halfway through reviewing a joint ops proposal when my phone buzzed once, then again Then 5 more times in quick succession. At first, I ignored it. Then I saw Eva's name flash across the screen. Break room, now. When Eva Rostova gave a one-word order, you didn't ask. You moved. The break room was crowded, silent, in that electric way that only comes before a detonation. I stepped inside and followed their gaze. The wall-mounted television was tuned to Fox and Friends. On screen, a young man in full West Point dress uniform sat straight-backed, hands folded, voice sombre. Ethan Vance, my cousin. The chyron read, Inside Operation Iron Echo, Heroic Decisions in the Field. I froze. He was talking, slow, reverent, like someone recalling trauma carved into his bones. It was the hardest decision of my life, he said. We were losing control of the AO. I had to step in. It cost lives, but we pushed through. The screen cut to drone footage, a map I had hand-drawn in Kabul. I felt the room shift around me, my breath slowing. Then the detail that punched the air from my lungs. Ethan described the terrain layout, the fallback orders, the airstrike delay, the final retreat timing, details only someone in the field could know, or someone with access to my debriefing files. He wasn't just borrowing inspiration, he was reciting my mission, word for word. When he choked up, eyes glistening, voice cracking, something snapped inside me. Not rage, not even betrayal, precision. A mental checklist began forming. I didn't speak. I turned and walked out. Eva followed. Back in my office, I slammed the door behind us. Did you know? I asked. I suspected, she said quietly. He's been cozying up to Connolly's circle. The same week your field report went dark. General Adrian Connolly. Of course, I sat down, fingers tight around my pen. They're using my work, rebranding it, selling it. Eva nodded. He's their new golden boy. The irony would have been laughable if it hadn't felt like a punch to the ribs. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Dad. Did you see the interview? Ethan was brilliant. The country needs more leaders like him. So proud. I stared at the screen. Then I called him. He picked up on the first ring. Riley, he said cheerfully, like we hadn't stood 10 feet apart in silence last week. Did you see Ethan? What a performance, huh? That was my operation, I said, ice in every word. He paused. Then, he needed the spotlight. It's good for the family. I blinked. You're saying this helps our image? He sighed. You're already a general, Harper. Let someone else shine for once. Don't make this about ego. Ego. The word sliced like shrapnel. This isn't about credit, I said. It's about truth. You of all people. But he cut me off. Don't ruin this. Not again. He hung up. I stared at the dead screen, phone still in hand. My reflection looked back, calm, cold, razor sharp. Then Ava said, You're not going to let this slide, are you? And something in me shifted. No, I said. I'm going to burn the whole lie down. The plan started in silence. No lawyers, no official reports. Just a whiteboard in Eva's private office, and 3 people who understood what was at stake. Me, Eva, and Spectre. Spectre wasn't his real name, of course. He was a shadow in cyber intel, a former defence contractor turned ghost. Eva had worked with him once during a multinational leak probe. She said he owed her. I didn't ask why. He appeared via secure link, blurry at first, then sharp. Late 30s, hoodie over a tactical tee, voice calm but clipped. I saw the broadcast, he said without preamble. You want the thread? I want the root, I replied, and every hand that fed it. He nodded. Ethan didn't hack your files. Someone handed them to him. I'll find out who. The call ended and I sat back, fingers steepled. My mind was already racing ahead. We weren't just exposing a lie. We were breaking a system built to erase people like me. That night, I scoured my archive. Briefings, timestamps, drone logs, command orders, all signed by me, all verifiable. I documented everything Ethan had parroted on live television. Each match felt like a blade pressing closer to truth. The more I uncovered, the clearer the betrayal became. Ethan wasn't just a pawn. He was a project the media knew, the Pentagon knew, and someone high up had approved the transfer of sensitive intel not to a field commander, but to a political golden boy with perfect teeth and the right last name. A week later, Spectre sent me a file, encrypted, labelled Delta Thread. Inside, a series of emails between General Connolly and my father. I read each one 3 times. They weren't coded or hidden, just casual, cold. 2 men planning a narrative rehabilitation project. My father had offered background context on me, phrases like emotionally rigid, idealistic to a fault, struggles with authority. They'd used that language to justify sidelining me, undermining me, replacing me. Ethan's reward? A fast-tracked clearance for Intel Command, contingent on his media performance. I stared at the last line of Connolly's message. Legacy matters. We shape it, or someone else will. The rage didn't come all at once. It rose in waves, cold first, then hot, then searing. But beneath it was something sharper. Resolve. I printed the emails, annotated them, compiled voice memos, contacted Sarah Jennings, an investigative journalist who'd once covered a corruption case I'd helped uncover overseas. She didn't hesitate. "I've heard whispers about this," she said, "and I never bought Ethan's act. Let's build the case." While Spectre traced digital footprints, Sarah dug into off-the-record meetings. She found comlogs between Marcus and 3 military correspondents. Dates matched the stories that praised Ethan and questioned my leadership. Every step I took, I documented, not just to expose them, but to ensure no one could twist it later. One afternoon, as I was organising files in the war room we'd set up in Spectre's off-grid server bunker, Eva walked in holding a manila folder. "This just came from my contact in Office of Personnel Command," she said. I opened it. At the top, suspension pending investigation, charge, unauthorised dissemination of classified data, accusation, breach of Category 1 security protocol. I blinked. "They're trying to bury you," Eva said softly, "before you can speak." I nodded once. "Then we speak louder." That night I drafted a plan, not for war, for testimony, for truth. And as I wrote, a single thought repeated like a mantra. They didn't just steal my story, they tried to delete me from it. I was officially suspended on a Thursday. The email arrived at 0700 sharp, sterile in tone and cold in delivery. Effective immediately, Major General Harper Quinn is placed on administrative leave pending security breach investigation. I sat at my desk, the message still open, coffee untouched, watching the cursor blink like a pulse. Outside, the hallway buzzed with the sounds of a typical morning. Nothing about the building changed. Just me. I had 15 years of spotless service, no reprimands, no demerits, not a single breach. But suddenly, on the exact day my debrief package for Operation Iron Echo was scheduled for internal audit, I was labelled a threat. They weren't just pushing me aside. They were trying to erase me. I gathered my things in silence. No guards, no shouting, just a quiet escort past colleagues who stared at their screens, pretending not to notice. A few glanced up, confused maybe, or curious. No one spoke. At the entrance, Eva waited. She handed me a manila envelope. "Your last intel briefing. I marked your inputs in red, dated, signed. You'll need it." I nodded. "Thank you." "This isn't over," she said. "They think you'll roll over. You won't." She wasn't asking, she was reminding me. I left the Pentagon like a ghost, one they hoped would vanish without haunting. By sunset, I was in Arlington, tucked into the secure flat Spectre had prepared. Concrete walls, encrypted servers, blackout curtains. The kind of place where truth didn't have to whisper. We got to work. Spectre pulled up login metadata from the Pentagon's internal network. They cloned your biometric ID, he said, pointing to a heat map. Used it to access classified drone reports, but whoever did it left a breadcrumb. He highlighted a static IP node. Military registered, he said. Guess where it pings from? I didn't need to. Connolly's office, I answered. Spectre nodded. He didn't just approve your suspension, he executed the breach. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt fury. It had been so easy for them. Forge a login, plant a flag, and watch my name bleed out in silence. No trial, no chance, just a quiet deletion. I paced the room. They won't stop here, I said. Ethan's too deep. Marcus is orchestrating press leaks, and my father... Spectre cut in. Your father's not just complicit. He's operational. He opened another file. A chain of unencrypted emails, one of which I recognised instantly, my father's Gmail. The contents? Updates to General Connolly on my behavioural tendencies, written in third-person clinical tone. Prone to moral rigidity, reacts poorly to male authority figures, exhibits isolation under stress. They didn't even have to fabricate evidence. They just weaponised the pieces of me they'd always misunderstood. That night, I barely slept. Sarah called from a diner off I-395. She was already there when I arrived, notebook open, coffee steaming. I've been digging into Marcus's comms, she said. Found 3 off-the-record lunches with Pentagon journalists. All between the Ethan broadcast and your suspension. She slid a recorder across the table. I pressed play. Marcus's voice crackled through the static. My sister's got medals, sure, but don't confuse luck with leadership. She's not exactly... stable. My stomach clenched. He's not just managing Ethan's rise, Sarah said. He's managing your fall. I nodded slowly. He always was the good son, I muttered, even when it meant setting fire to his sister. We left the diner with a folder full of quotes, timestamps and metadata. Sarah's eyes gleamed, fierce. They wanted whispers, she said. We'll give them thunder. Back in the flat, I laid everything on the table, emails, audio, logs, a roadmap of betrayal, but this time I wasn't the one being erased. I was the one writing the story. The storm was coming. I could feel it in the air. Not just the buzz of an impending media storm, but the anticipation, the quiet build-up before an explosion, the pressure of it pressing down on me, every second heavier than the last. Every shred of evidence was a countdown. I knew this war wasn't about physical battles. It wasn't about drones or boots on the ground. This was a different kind of warfare, the kind where truth was the weapon and silence the shield. The kind where they'd tried to bury me under the weight of their lies, but now it was my turn to make them feel the tremor. Spectre worked through the night, digging deeper. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The more we uncovered, the darker it became. It wasn't just a conspiracy of silence anymore. This was orchestrated. The emails from my father to Connolly were just the beginning. Spectre pulled more logs, this time showing communications between military contractors and Marcus's press contacts. Payments disguised as consultation fees. Meetings marked as private strategy sessions, but every detail was about image, control, and narrative manipulation. They weren't just trying to erase me, they were trying to bury the truth. By morning, we had our first target, a journalist at Military Times, known for publishing flattering profiles of new rising stars. He'd written 2 glowing pieces about Ethan, each one conveniently timed just before a promotion. I sent Sarah the files. Track him, find out who's pulling his strings. That evening she called. I got him, she said, breathless. He's meeting with Marcus tomorrow. DC private club. Under the table, of course. I didn't hesitate. We're crashing the party, I said. The club was upscale, everything polished, everything perfect, a place where the elite network swap stories and line their pockets with influence. When I walked in, the doorman gave me a quick once-over before stepping aside. Eva was already inside. We didn't need any fanfare. The small round table at the back corner was already occupied by Marcus and his new friend, a reporter with slick hair and an even slicker smile. He was the one, the man who'd been spinning Ethan's story into gold. We took our seats without a word. Marcus stiffened immediately, eyes narrowing, lips tight. He knew me too well. I'd always been the problem in his perfect family narrative. "Harper," he said, voice low. "What's this about?" "Cut the games, Marcus," I said, my tone colder than I felt. "We're not here to chat." The journalist looked between us, confused, but I didn't let him off the hook. "You wrote about Ethan, didn't you?" I asked, locking eyes with him. "About his heroism, his bravery. You don't know a damn thing about that mission, not a single detail." He shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. I was briefed," I smiled. "By who? By Marcus?" Marcus's face reddened. "You don't know what you're talking about." I ignored him. "You're both in on it. You're both part of the plan to rewrite my legacy." I slid the printouts across the table. "Here's the email, here's the log, here's the proof. Now ask yourself, what kind of man betrays his sister to make himself look good?" Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "This isn't about you. This is about you, Marcus. This is always about you," I interrupted. "You're the one who's been pulling the strings, painting me as the failure. You've used me for everything I'm worth, and now you're ready to erase me." The journalist didn't know what to do. He looked between us, scanning the papers I'd placed in front of him. The evidence was undeniable. There was no denying it anymore. He folded the papers slowly, his face pale. I'll write the truth. I'll fix it." I leaned forward. "No, you'll do more than that. You'll make sure everyone knows what really happened. You'll tell the world who's been lying, and you'll make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." I stood up, throwing my napkin down on the table. "And you, Marcus?" I turned to him. You'll stop playing games with my life. This family is built on lies, and I'm done being a pawn." I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked out, Eva right behind me. When we got outside, the cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't feel the sting. I didn't feel anything but clarity. The war had begun. The hearing was scheduled faster than I expected. One moment, I was sitting in my flat, cold coffee in hand, reviewing my notes, and the next, the phone rang with a scheduled date from the Senate Armed Services Committee. It was a formality, they told me. A routine investigation, a hearing where I could defend myself. But I knew better. This wasn't a fair trial. It wasn't even a real hearing. This was a show, a performance to justify my removal. They'd already decided what I was, a threat, someone who didn't know her place, someone who needed to be silenced. I walked into the hearing room with my head held high, every step like a drumbeat in my chest. The press cameras lined the walls, their lenses trained on me, waiting for my every move, every word. The room itself felt like a battlefield, rows of seats lined with senators, aides, journalists, and a few unfamiliar faces who seemed to be waiting for me to slip up. I wasn't just standing before the committee, I was standing before my family's entire legacy, watching them wait for me to crumble. I didn't. I took my seat at the long table, opposite a sea of politicians who already seemed to have made up their minds. General Adrian Connolly was sitting at the front, his uniform polished to perfection. He leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied grin on his face, as if he already knew how this was going to play out. And next to him, Marcus. His expression was unreadable, but I saw the tightness in his jaw, the way his fingers gripped the edges of his notes. He was uncomfortable, but not enough, not yet. The committee chair, a senator from Delaware, cleared his throat, and the room went still. "General Quinn," he said, his voice booming, "you've requested this opportunity to address serious allegations. The floor is yours." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't even about them. This was about everything they'd tried to erase. This was about exposing the truth. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. My uniform felt heavier than ever, but in the best way. This was the weight of responsibility, not shame. I'm here today not just to defend my record, I said, my voice steady. I'm here because I've had enough of being silenced. I've had enough of being erased from my own story, my own family, my own military. The room shifted. I could feel eyes on me, some uncomfortable, some intrigued, but there was no turning back now. The words had already left my mouth. The truth had already been set in motion. I was told I didn't belong, I continued. Told I was too rigid, too idealistic, that I didn't know my place. But I've spent years saving lives. I've been in the trenches, on the ground, making decisions that kept soldiers alive while some of you were writing press releases. You can't erase me. You can't erase my work. I paused. The air in the room felt thick, charged with tension. I could hear my own heartbeat, but I didn't let it sway me. But you've tried, I said. You've tried to bury me, to steal my name, to steal my story and rewrite it. Ethan Vance didn't serve in Operation Iron Echo. I did. He didn't lead that mission. I did. And you gave him my credit, and you let him take it all. I looked directly at Marcus. I am not your failure, and I am not your scapegoat. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't dare. His face had gone pale, but there was nothing more he could hide. He had been exposed, and he knew it. He knew the press would be on him as soon as this was over, dissecting every word he'd spoken, every move he'd made. But this wasn't just about Marcus. It was about a system that had used him, used all of them, to push me down while propping up the people who were easier to manage. I turned my attention back to the committee, who was now leaning forward, the first signs of genuine interest appearing on their faces. It wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't even about Marcus or Ethan. It was about the broader implications, the way a system like this could destroy lives if it was allowed to continue unchecked. You've used your power to create a narrative, I said, addressing General Connolly, who had been too silent for too long. You used my name, my career, as currency in a game you were never supposed to play. And when you couldn't control me, you tried to destroy me. You've done it to others before. I'm not the first, and I won't be the last if you're allowed to keep pulling strings behind the scenes. The committee was still, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I'm not here for your approval, I finished. I'm here for justice, for truth, and for everyone who's been buried under the lies you've built. I sat back down, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like the calm before the storm. But I knew something they didn't. This time, the storm wouldn't pass over. It was just beginning. The room was dead silent. Not a single soul moved as I took my seat again, the weight of my words sinking in. For the first time, I felt the full weight of the truth, and it was heavy enough to shake the room. The senators exchanged glances, murmuring quietly to each other. A few looked at Marcus, who was now shifting in his seat, his hands clenched tight. The guilt was written all over his face, but I didn't care. He could carry that weight for the rest of his life. Senator Henderson, a tall man with greying hair and a stern face, cleared his throat. General Quinn, he said, his voice cold but measured, you've made some serious accusations today, and we take those seriously. But before we proceed, we need to hear from the other side. Ethan Vance, sitting just a few seats away from Marcus, stood up. His face was a picture of composure, his uniform pressed to perfection, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He wasn't as calm as he appeared. The committee turned their attention to him as he took the floor. Thank you, Senator Henderson, Ethan began, his voice steady but laced with the faintest tremor. General Quinn's claims are, quite frankly, misinformed. I served with honour and distinction during Operation Iron Echo. I worked tirelessly alongside my team to ensure the mission's success. I was entrusted with key decisions, and I did my job to the best of my ability. The accusations made here today are based on personal grievances, not facts. I wanted to laugh. Ethan's performance was so rehearsed, so perfect, that it felt almost comical. He wasn't even trying to hide the fact that he was playing a role, one that had been assigned to him by a network of powerful people who wanted to see him rise at my expense. General Quinn's remarks about the mission, he continued, are not only inaccurate but inflammatory. The decisions I made were guided by my training and experience, just like any other officer in the field. The idea that I'm somehow taking credit for another's work is baseless. I couldn't let him finish. This wasn't just about me. This was about the hundreds of soldiers who had been impacted by decisions that were now being twisted for personal gain. I stood up abruptly, the room falling silent once again. "Enough, Ethan," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "You didn't lead Iron Echo. You weren't even there for most of it. And don't try to spin your way out of this. You're nothing but a puppet for a system that's been using you for years." Ethan's face turned a shade of red I hadn't thought possible. He was furious, but he didn't say anything. He couldn't. Not when the truth was sitting there, exposed for everyone to see. I turned to the committee, my voice rising with every word. This is not about one operation. This is about a pattern, a system that rewards those who can smile for the cameras and play the part. It's about a military culture that hides its truths, that sacrifices the soldiers who actually do the work in favour of the ones who play the game. It's time to stop pretending. For a moment, I saw something flicker across the faces of the senators. Maybe it was doubt, or maybe it was a simple realization that what I was saying was not just true, but undeniable. I could almost see them questioning everything they'd been told about Ethan and about me. But then Senator Henderson spoke again, his tone colder than before. "General Quinn, we will need to verify these claims before moving forward. There are processes in place for this sort of thing." "Of course there are," I replied, my voice calm. "Processes to bury the truth. Processes that have been used to erase me for years." I didn't wait for him to respond. I wasn't here to play by their rules anymore. I had already taken the first step in dismantling the narrative they'd created. This hearing was just another piece of the puzzle, but it was a crucial one. The stakes were higher now, and I wasn't going to back down. A few senators looked uncomfortable, others more resolute. But I could see it in their eyes. The change was coming. They could try to deny it, they could try to discredit me, but the truth was already out. The system was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. I looked at Marcus one last time. His eyes were narrowed, his hands shaking slightly as he fiddled with the pen in front of him. He knew. He knew this was the beginning of the end for him, and I wasn't going to let him off the hook. The chairperson cleared his throat, signalling the end of the session. "Thank you, General Quinn. We will reconvene after further review of the evidence presented here today. This session is adjourned." I stood up slowly, my gaze never leaving Marcus or Ethan. I could feel their eyes burning into the back of my skull as I walked out. But I didn't care. I had already won. The world had already seen the truth. And it was only a matter of time before everything they had built came crashing down. The dust had settled by the time the Senate hearing was over, but the aftermath was far from quiet. As I left the building, the cameras swarmed around me, their flashbulbs strobing like 1,000 judgmental eyes. Reporters shouted questions, their voices rising above the street noise. Some called me a hero, others a disruptor. Some just wanted a soundbite. But I didn't stop. I didn't need their approval anymore. The only thing that mattered was the work I'd done and the work that was still left to do. Back at my apartment, I stripped out of my uniform, the weight of the fabric suddenly feeling unbearable. It wasn't the weight of the stars, the ribbons, or the medals. It was the weight of expectations, the weight of my family's legacy, the weight of a system that had tried to crush me for simply being who I was. I sat down at my desk, staring at the stack of papers in front of me. My father's emails, the media leaks, the forged intel reports. I had already exposed them to the world, but the task wasn't over. The pieces were scattered, but they needed to be assembled. They needed to be brought into the light. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who'd been ignored, erased, or silenced for the sake of power. It was about dismantling the machine that fed on the lies of those who controlled the narrative. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't want to. The adrenaline from the hearing still buzzed in my veins. I went over every detail, every flaw in their story, until it all clicked into place. By morning, I had everything ready. The emails from my father, the forged reports from Connolly's office, the transcripts of Ethan's lies, all of it. I sent it to Sarah. I sent it to every journalist who'd ever reported on the heroes of Operation Iron Echo. I wasn't going to wait for them to pick up the pieces. I was going to force them to. It was time for the truth to be told. Within hours, the stories broke. First, it was Military Times. Their editor ran a piece that called into question the ethics of the entire operation. Then, other outlets picked it up, expanding the scope, citing evidence of tampering, of coordinated manipulation, and of blatant theft. The press couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. The media storm quickly escalated, and Ethan's golden boy status began to crack. It didn't take long for the military to respond. General Connolly was removed from his post. An internal investigation was launched into the chain of command, and within a week, every officer involved in the cover-up, including Marcus, was reassigned or put under review. And then came the calls from the White House, from defense contractors, from top-ranking officials who were desperate to get ahead of the story, but I wasn't interested in their offers. I didn't want a position of power built on the same system of lies. I didn't want a seat at their table. Not anymore. I was done. Eva called the next morning, her voice crackling with excitement. "You did it," she said. "You brought them all down. The floodgates are open. The truth is out." I didn't answer at first. I wasn't sure what I felt. "I'm just getting started," I said, my voice even. The words felt solid, as if they'd been waiting to be spoken. The real work starts now. I didn't take the job offers. I didn't accept the promotions. Instead, I put all of my energy into something else, a new purpose. The Stone Institute for Honourable Leadership. It wasn't about honouring a name. It wasn't about legacy. It was about something far more important, truth. I bought a piece of land in Jefferson County, Missouri, far away from the past I had left behind. Acres of oak trees and wide open sky. It was the perfect place to build, to heal, to grow. The Institute was a sanctuary, a space for soldiers and leaders who had been forgotten, dismissed, or manipulated by the system. We focused on resilience, ethics in combat, and the mental strength it took to keep fighting when the fight wasn't just on the battlefield. We taught the truth about war, the real cost of it, the moral weight of leadership, and how to keep your humanity intact when everything around you tries to tear it away. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to quit, days when I wondered if I'd made the right choice, when the old pain crept back in, reminding me of all I'd lost. But then someone would stay after class, someone would ask a question, someone would tell their story, and it felt like home. A few months later, I found myself standing in the memorial garden behind the Institute, pulling weeds with one of the cadets. It was a quiet afternoon, the air thick with the smell of earth and growth. My mother appeared at the edge of the garden. She had been silent for months, but this time there was no mask, no pretense. She walked toward me, a small box wrapped in brown paper in her hands. "I've been carrying this for a while," she said, holding it out to me. "I'm sorry for everything, for not seeing you." I opened the box. Inside was my first marathon medal, the one I thought had been lost forever. It was polished, pristine, as if it had been waiting for this moment. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I wasn't brave enough to see you." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Instead, I closed my fingers around the medal and nodded. Sometimes healing wasn't about forgiveness. It was about finding peace in the places that still held meaning. And as I stood there in the garden, the sun setting behind the trees, I realized that I wasn't the one who had to rebuild anything. I had already done it. The real strength wasn't in what I had lost, it was in everything I had chosen to build from the ashes. Weeks passed, and the Institute began to take shape, both in structure and in purpose. Every new class, every new person who walked through the doors added a layer to what we were building, a place where truth was the foundation, not the exception. A place where soldiers, leaders, and civilians alike could come to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't just about teaching resilience. It was about teaching how to hold onto your integrity when everything around you told you to let go. How to fight for something bigger than yourself without losing yourself in the process. We weren't just creating better leaders. We were creating people who could stand tall in the face of betrayal and never look away from the truth. And yet, despite the progress, the weight of my past still clung to me like a shadow. There were nights when I found myself standing at the edge of the memorial garden, staring into the empty sky, wondering if the ghosts of my family's expectations would ever stop haunting me. The silence of their absence was a constant companion, but I was learning how to live with it. I didn't expect them to show up. After everything, I didn't want them to. But I still found myself waiting for my father to come to his senses, waiting for Marcus to realize that his lies were finally catching up with him, waiting for my mother to stop pretending that everything was okay. And then, one day, my mother showed up. It was late in the afternoon. The sun was dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across the garden. I was sitting on the bench near the path when I saw her walking toward me. Her gait was slow, tentative, as if she wasn't sure if she should be here or if I would even want her here. But there she was. I stood as she approached, unsure of what to say. The years of silence between us had created a gap too wide to bridge with simple words. She stopped a few feet away, her hands clasped in front of her. "I didn't know where else to go," she said softly. "I've been thinking about you, about everything. And I realized I never really saw you. Not for who you were, not for who you are." I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. The weight of everything, the years of hurt, the resentment, the grief, was too much to put into words. Instead, I simply nodded, gesturing to the bench beside me. She hesitated before sitting down. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for not being there for you, for not fighting for you. I made excuses for your father. I told myself you were just too hard, too intense, but that wasn't the truth. The truth is I was afraid of losing the image of the perfect family we worked so hard to create, afraid of what your truth might mean for our family." I closed my eyes, feeling the old ache rise in my chest. It was all so familiar, her words, her attempts to explain the unexplainable. And yet, they felt different now, more real, more raw. "You're not the problem, Harper," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. I failed you, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to make up for that. But I need you to know that I'm here now. I'm here for you, if you'll have me." I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, letting the quiet of the moment settle between us. "I don't need you to fix anything, Mom," I said finally, my voice steady. "I just need you to see me, to see who I am, not who you thought I should be." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I see you, Harper. I see you now. And I'm so proud of you, so proud of everything you've become." For the first time in years, the knot in my chest loosened. It wasn't a grand revelation. It wasn't an apology that wiped away the past. But it was a start, a beginning. As the evening grew darker, we sat there together in silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. There was no need for more words. What we had said, what we had shared, was enough for now. Later that night, I sat at my desk, going over the next phase of the Institute's programs. The paperwork was routine, but my mind kept drifting back to the conversation with my mother. She had come to me. She had admitted her mistakes. And while I wasn't ready to forgive everything, I realized that maybe it wasn't about forgiveness at all. Maybe it was about letting go. The truth was, I had already forgiven myself. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Sarah. "We're getting traction," she said. "More people are talking. The story's picking up steam. It's bigger than we thought." I leaned back in my chair, a small smile tugging at my lips. Good. Let's make sure it doesn't stop. The world was changing, piece by piece. The truth had started to seep into the cracks, and it wasn't going away. Neither was I. The Stone family legacy wasn't going to be buried by their lies. It wasn't going to be defined by their silence. I would rebuild it, on my terms. And this time I wouldn't be doing it alone.